The ocean stretched like a black mirror under the fractured moonlight of the South Pacific, 1943. Waves whispered secrets to the horizon, but tonight they carried death. A Japanese convoy sliced through the ink, 8 merchant ships swollen with rice, oil, and steel, their wakes trailing like veins pulsing life into the empire. Flanking them prowled 2 destroyers, silhouettes sharp as wolves on a leash, radar eyes piercing the void. High above, escorting fighters ghosted the clouds, unseen guardians. This was the artery of the rising sun. Every crate disgorged at Rabaul or Wewak fueled the beast. Zeros that raked the skies, tanks that chewed through jungles, soldiers spreading like fever across the islands. Japan's war machine drank greedily from these lifelines. Nick one, and it bled. Sever them, and it starved. But the Allies groped blindly in the gloom. Dawn bled red over the New Guinea coast, gilding the wreckage in crimson. A B-25 Mitchell limped toward home, belly gashed by flak, wings quivering like a drunk's unsteady hands. In the cockpit, Lieutenant Harlan Reynolds clutched the yoke, his bombardier slumped beside him, face drained to ash. Bombs had tumbled harmlessly into the swell, targets too slippery, escorts too vicious. "Control, this is Eagle 3, Reynolds rasped into the radio, voice fraying at the edges. "Negative on hits. Convoys scattered like roaches. Lost Tommy to a 0. Static slithered back, a serpent's hiss. At Dobodura airfield, ground crews swarmed the returning birds like ants on carrion. Fuel wept from punctures like arterial blood. Engines hacked black smoke into the humid air. Pilots staggered out, eyes sunk in pits, reciting the grim liturgy. The climb to 10,000 feet, the bomb run through veils of tracers, the impotent splatter of ordnance into froth. Night after night, the same dirge. Convoys slunk southward under darkness's cloak, skimming coastlines where reefs lay in wait like jagged teeth. By first light, they were phantoms. Cargo intact, crews jeering at the barren heavens. Allied bombers, lords of the formation, loosed their payloads from the stratosphere, but the sea guzzled most. Skip bombing? A desperate wager against ironclad hulls. Strafing? Mere pinpricks on armored flesh. The Pacific was no stage for surgical strikes. It was a sepulchre for noble failures, where intent dashed against apathy, and the foe chuckled from the troughs. Sweat beaded on maps tacked to bamboo walls in the briefing hut at Dobodura, late afternoon light slanting through cracks like accusatory fingers. Mosquitoes buzzed a low dirge, kin to distant flak. Colonel Elias Ironjaw Thorne paced, pointer stabbing at crimson lines coiling from the Solomons to New Britain. Flyers crammed the space, youthful masks carved by brine and defeat, leaning in, starved for salvation. "Those bastards are turning the Bismarck Sea into their private boulevard," Thorne growled, fist crashing down like a gavel. 8,000 tons last week, enough juice to chain MacArthur's lads for months. High altitude, they burrow low. Low and dirty, hornets on our tails. We're hemorrhaging, gentlemen. Ideas, or we toast New Guinea in flames. Silence fell thick, broken by a single cough. Eyes drifted to the corner shadow, boots crusted in ochre clay, sleeves hitched over arms corded like knotted hawser. Major Paul Irwin Gunn, Pappy to the wingman he'd outaged, sat unmoving at 42, face a weathered atlas, eyes flint shards beneath his cap's shadow. He didn't rise. He sketched, pencil scraping over a wadded napkin, lines unfurling into something savage. A fuselage flayed open, a barrel thrusting forth like a predator's incisor. A pilot broke the hush from the rear, voice teetering between jest and plea. "Strap a sub to the wing? Christ, Pappy, you jury-rigged that P-40 with baling wire last month? Pulled a rabbit yet?" Gunn lifted his gaze, deliberate as a hammer's fall. His words rolled out low, tidal and unyielding. "Not a rabbit, a cannon." Laughter bubbled, snuffed swift by the steel in his stare. Thorne beckoned him with a tilt of chin. Gunn rose, napkin unfolding like a battle flag, pinned beside the charts. The drawing, a B-25, nose flensed bare, a 75mm M3 howitzer, ripped from a Sherman's corpse, jammed into its vitals. No glass perch for the bombardier, a hunter's gullet. "We don't lob from heaven's ledge," Gunn said, finger shadowing the tube's length, voice steady as bolted plate. "We plunge to the waves, sight it like a long gun. One round he or AP bores through a destroyer's hide like tissue. Chase with 50 cal hell and that convoy's pyre. No drift, no divine whim, just termination." The air thickened, skepticism curdling like spoiled milk. A captain huffed, The orthodoxies murmur, bombers don't hunt that way, cannons root in mud. But Thorne hunched closer, fingers tattooing the wood in possibilities code. High stakes, Major, he rumbled. Kickback might splinter that kite to kindling, and the ordnance? We're foraging like urchins in a boneyard. I'll forge it solo, Gunn replied, eyes adrift on tides unseen. Poach the tube from the depot's scrap heap. Trial on a derelict off the barrier. If she soars, if she strikes, we rewrite the rules. Thorne appraised him, glimpsing the spectre in those eyes. Not vainglory. A blade, honed personal. What's the fire under this, Pappy? Thorne pressed, softer now, probing. You've been a ghost since Manila dropped. Payback's bite? Gunn's pencil hung suspended. The hut dissolved in haze. Memory surged. Manila Harbor, December 1941, pandemonium unbound. Zeros embroidered the firmament with tracers, bombs erupting tangerine on the piers. The USS Piedmont, Gunn's tender, pitched in the surge as he clambered onto a PBY Catalina, shuttling wives and young to Corregidor's embrace. His kin, Clara, keen and unbowed, gripping their brood. Catherine at 14, Paul Jr. 12, Mary 10, John a tender 8. Their visages ghosted the canopy, tiny palms fluttering farewell. Paul, extract us, Clara urged over the tumult, gaze a forge. Swear it, you'll carve this short. He dipped his head, gullet forged shut, but the vault sealed. The collapse was a scythe. Baton withered, Corregidor splintered. Final whisper from the bastion, Santo Tomas. They're corralling us. Cages of wire and mockery, allotments that jeered at famine. Clara's timber lingered, amulet against the void. Swear it. He'd piloted rescues, mended hunters amid inferno. Manila, his adopted hearth, where he'd trial-hop Panams over cerulean atolls, tumbled like a solar plexus strike. Smuggled missives, holding. Gaunt but holding. The little ones query your shadow, then void. Whispers crept, camp flux, sentries with edged steel, vessels evading cordons to glut the tyrants. In the hut once more, Gunn creased the napkin shut. His blood, pent in that kiln of stone, each convoy a lash. Grain for the shogun's spawn, while his thinned to whispers. Walls he'd failed to breach, but the brine, the conduits? Those he could throttle. It's the clock, Colonel, Gunn murmured, rumble veiled in storm. Their hourglass, draining. Thorne sighed deep, nodded curt. Sanction bestowed, not with trumpets, but the heft of one soul's private crusade. Dusk gilded the airstrip at Townsville Air Depot in Queensland, Australia. Hangars hunkered like oxidized titans, tin flanks shuddering in the trades. Mechanics teemed beneath arc lamps, umbras capering elongated. The breeze thrummed with avgas bite and weld sizzle, palms greased to obsidian. In Hangar 7's forsaken nook, Gunn toiled solitary. Schematics? Unborn. Pure sinew, tempered in naval forges from 17, wrenching mills on the Langley fleet's inaugural flat top. Iowa plowboy turned propeller priest, he'd bartered furrows for fans, Manila's blaze for radial thunder. Now sorrow his hammer. He orbited the B-25J, Old Faithful, a battle-scarred Mitchell earthbound by a sundered beam, her forward pane mocked in gleam, diaphanous, brittle. Gunn's gnarled digits ghosted it, overlaying Clara's lineaments, dissolving. No longer. Torches snarled to life, sparks showered inverse firmaments. He incised, pain exploded in crystal requiem, fragments grinding beneath heel. Plates unspooled, gauged by instinct, fused with incantations. The skeleton protested as he girded, braces akin to cage, anchorages for the coming Leviathan. Perspiration etched channels down his spine, blending with Flux's venom. Hours hemorrhaged to midnight. A spanner skidded, clang mirroring his throb. For Catherine's mirth, Paul's curious, Mary's sketches blurred on barrack planks. Each pin a pledge, truncate the fray, famine the wardens, reclaim them. Gray dawn insinuated, pitiless. The prow armored, a stub nose louvered for backlash. Vacant, expectant. Gunn retreated a pace, daubing brow on a cloth reeking of phantom powder. The craft regarded him, transfigured from hauler. Ravenous kin. The tube, Dawn's quarry. Pilfered from a mangled M3, trundled by truck over cratered lanes. Draftsman would deride, 75mm aloft, backlash a bronco's lash. Let orthodoxy erect ramparts round Manila, he'd craft sappers. Gale veered, freighted with reef brine. Gunn kindled a fag, ember pulsing like a charge's thread. Afar, a flotilla's furrow, fancied relentless, roiled the deep. Hulks ripe for pyre. Clara, the litany intoned, endure. Inbound, not with wards, with conflagration. The portal groaned to. Implements rattled to hush. Beyond the Pacific sulked armadas amassing a cult. In a tin hangar in Queensland, one man was about to turn a bomber into vengeance. The sun clawed higher over Townsville, baking the hangar into a furnace where shadows shrank and regrets stretched long. Paul Gunn paused amid the gutted B-25, the acrid ghost of weld smoke clinging to his lungs like an old grudge. His hands, calloused relics from Iowa fields, scarred by propellers and wrenches, traced the reinforced bulkhead, feeling the pulse of metal still warm from the torch. This isn't enough, the thought coiled, serpent-tight. Not yet. The cannon waited in the Jeep's bed, shrouded under canvas, a salvaged M3 barrel glinting promises of thunder. But to wield it, he needed more than steel. He needed the fire that birthed him. Dawn's light slanted through the hangar's slats, dust motes swirling like spent casings. Gunn sank onto a crate, the wood groaning under him, and let memory pull him under. Back to the boy who'd traded plowshares for propellers when the world was flat earth and endless sky, not islands chained in blood. Iowa, 1917. The Great War's echo thrummed across the plains like a distant drum, boys enlisting with pitchforks in hand, eyes on the horizon where machines promised glory. Paul Irwin Gunn, 16 and wiry as barbed wire, watched from the family forge, his father's anvil ringing hymns to iron. Blacksmith blood ran thick, hammers shaping horse hooves into weapons of labor, sparks birthing tools from raw spite. But Paul dreamed bigger. Airplanes, those fragile kites of canvas and wire, were gods in newsreels, devouring distance with a propeller's snarl. Dad's place is ground, he'd mutter to the wind, sketching biplanes on feed sacks. I'm for the clouds. The elder Gunn, face etched by decades of fire and frost, would grunt over the bellows, sweat carving canyons in his brow. Sky's a liar's throne, boy, falls hard when the wind turns. Stick to what holds. But Paul shipped out anyway. Navy-bound, the call of the sea louder than sod. Boot camp in Newport, Rhode Island, turned farmhand to machinist, disassembling engines blindfolded, oil blacking his nails like war paint. By 1918, armistice or not, he was wrenching on the USS Langley, America's first aircraft carrier, a coal-fired behemoth converted from a collier, her flight deck a promise scrawled in rivets. Gunn crawled her innards, coaxing right whirlwinds to life, the roar drowning his father's warnings. She's alive when she sings, he told a deckhand one dawn, palms slick with grease as the Langley steamed off Yorktown, biplanes catapulting into the Virginia haze. The kid, fresh from Brooklyn tenements, laughed through chattered teeth. Alive? Hell, Pappy, that's witchcraft. You talk to him like lovers. Not talk, Gunn replied, wiping a rag across his forehead, the salt sting of baptism. Listen, metal's got a voice, screams when it's hurt, purrs when it's whole. Fix what's broken, and she flies true. Those years forged him. Panama Canal runs where humidity warped wood and rust gnawed steel, Philippine patrols turquoise bays mocking the gray dreadnoughts below. He rose quick, chief machinist's mate by 25, piloting lessons stolen in off hours, logging hours on jennies that bucked like unbroken colts. Manila became his harbor, sultry nights in the Ermita district, Clara's laughter cutting the humid dark like a cool breeze. She was a nurse, sharp as a scalpel, eyes the color of storm-tossed waves. Met her at a USO dance, 1928. Paul in dress whites, awkward amid the swing band's brass, her in a frock that swirled like smoke. You fly for the Navy, or just to impress? She'd teased, hand light on his arm, pulse sinking to the clarinet's wail. Fly to see the world, he'd said, voice low over the din, pulling her close. But with you, I'd circle one island forever. Marriage followed swift, vows in a chapel overlooking Manila Bay, the sea a silver sheet under monsoon stars. Children came like gifts, Catherine first, fierce and questioning, Paul Jr., all curiosity and engine grease, Mary with her mother's fire, John, the quiet anchor. Gunn balanced Navy tours with Pan-American contracts, test-hopping Sikorsks over the archipelago, mapping routes where coral atolls pierced the blue like scattered teeth. Life was rhythm, the right R-1820's thrum under his seat, Clara's hand in his at dusk, the kids' shouts chasing fireflies in the garden. But the world tilted. 1941. Whispers from Tokyo, embargoes tightening like nooses, admirals drilling for the storm. Gunn, now a lieutenant commander in the Asiatic Fleet, prepped the Piedmont for shadow war, seaplanes scouting, tenders patching the fleet's wounds. Manila pulsed with false normalcy, markets hawking adobo and silk, zeros yet to darken the skies. Then December 8th, or the 7th, their clocks be damned. The hammer fell. Radios crackled with Pearl's agony, then the local thunder. Formations blotting the sun, Val dive bombers keening like banshees. Gunn raced to the harbor, heart a piston gone wild, barking orders as the Piedmont shuddered under near misses. Get the families out, Corregidor, now. Chaos swallowed sense, PBYs overloading, wives clutching babes as waves slapped the hulls. Clara boarded last, children in tow, her face a mask of iron will. Paul, swear you'll end this, she said, voice slicing the propeller's whine, hands framing his face slick with spray. Not for flags, for us, make it quick. I swear, he rasped, throat closing like a vice, the Catalina's engines drowning his lie. Quick? This beast devours years. But he pushed off, watching her silhouette shrink against the rock's guns, a fortress in the bay's froth. The fall accelerated, Clark Field gutted, B-17s smoldering like sacrificial pyres. Gunn flew ferries, evacuating brass, scouting Jap landings until the noose tightened. Bataan, that peninsula of hell, troops hacking malaria from the ranks, artillery duels echoing like God's wrath. He nursed a shot-up P-40 back to base one night, undercarriage screaming, tracers nipping his tail like hounds. Mayday, Piedmont Control, this is Gunn, he panted into the mic, altimeter spinning wild. Taking fire, Manila inbound, tell her. Static. A burst severed the line. He nursed her down on a strip near Lingayen Gulf, flames licking the cowling, ground crew hauling him clear as the bird expired in a pyre of its own. Word came piecemeal. The rocks surrender. May 6. Corregidor's guns mute, gun cells marching survivors to Santo Tomas. Old university turned prison, 3,000 souls in halls meant for lectures, not limbo. Clara's letter, smuggled via a Red Cross whisper. We're here. Food's thin. Rice and weevils, kids hold, Catherine reads to them at night. Your promise, keep it. Gunn's world narrowed to that vow. Demoted? No matter. Reassigned to Australia, 5th Air Force, under Kenney's sharp eye, ferrying parts, modifying birds for the pushback. But sleep evaded, nightmares of bayonets at the wire, Clara's frame hollowing under tropical rot. Convoys taunted, those iron snakes feeding Rabal's maw. Every ton a day his family lingered. Townsville, 1942. General George Kenney, short, bulldog tenacious, summoned him to a tent reeking of tobacco and resolve. Maps sprawled like flayed hides, pins marking the bleed. You're the wizard, Gunn, Kenney said, cigar ash tumbling like spent rounds. Fixed that B-17 with spit and spite last month. Manila's eating you, see it in your eyes. Channel it. We need birds that bite, not just buzz. Gunn nodded, the general's words a bellows to his forge. Sir, the convoys, they're the vein, cut 'em, and the islands starve. Give me latitude, I'll make 'em pay. Kenney eyed him, smoke-veiling judgment. Latitude's yours, but if it flops, it's your neck. Rage is fuel, don't let it blind you. Blind, Gunn thought, exiting into the monsoon haze. It sharpens. Back in the bays he tinkered. 50 cal pods on P-38s, skip bomb racks refined to scalpels. But the cannon idea festered, born in a foxhole sketch, after a raid where bombs plumed harmless over a freighter's deck. Not from above, from the teeth. Now, in the hangar, the Jeep rumbled in, Jack Fox at the wheel, engineer prodigy, all slide rule and skepticism, glasses fogged from the coastal climb. Fox, Kenney's wonderkind, hauled the barrel with a grunt, its weight a judgment. Christ, Pappy, this beast's for tanks, not kites, Fox said, propping it against the nose, the bore yawning black as a grave. Recoil will torque the airframe like a bottle opener. Math says no, vibration harmonics alone. Math's for desks, Gunn cut in, hefting a mount from the bench, his voice gravel over silk. War's for results. Help me bet it or watch from the fence. Fox hesitated, then shrugged, tools clinking like conspirators. They worked through the morning. Barrels sleeved into the prow, trunnions bolted to fresh spars, hydraulic dampers improvised from truck shocks. Gunn's hands moved with a father's precision, each torque for a child's breath, each weld sealing a nightmare shut. The smell of hot metal mingled with sea salt drifting in, a reminder of hulls that needed holing. By noon she squatted complete. Old Faithful reborn, nose a blunt snarler, the 75mm muzzle protruding like a grudge unchained. Fox stepped back, wiping palms on trousers, awe cracking his doubt. She looks hungry. First test, Reef Hulk tomorrow? Gunn lit another smoke, ember flaring against the shadow of his cap. Dawn, load he rounds, practice loads first. If she cracks, we patch. If she sings. He trailed off, eyes on the horizon where the Bismarck Sea brooded, convoys coiling unseen. Clara's face ghosted there, thinner now in his mind's forge, whispering the vow anew. Quick. For us. The Pacific wind howled a challenge, carrying the faint thunder of distant surf. Gunn crushed the butt under heel, the crunch a punctuation to his resolve. Time's orthodoxy. Bureaucrats in Washington, engineers with their neat ledgers, wouldn't bind him. He'd bend physics to fury, turn grief's weight into momentum. He couldn't save them yet, but he could make their captors drown in fire. Dawn fractured the Queensland sky like a shell's impact, pale light seeping through the mangroves to gild the reef's teeth offshore. The air hung heavy with brine and anticipation, the Bismarck Sea a restless slate beyond, where convoys ghosted southward under night's forgiving veil. At Townsville's edge, Hangar 7 stirred early, ground crews shuffling in the half-light, coffee steaming in dented mugs, the scent of chicory mingling with the perpetual tang of hydraulic fluid. Paul Gunn moved among them like a shadow given purpose, his silhouette etched against the B-25's prow, now a armored snarl cradling the 75mm maw. Old Faithful squatted on the hardstand, tires sinking into coral dust, her belly loaded with 6 practice rounds, dummies gutted of powder but heavy with intent. Jack Fox arrived with the dawn patrol, toolbox clanking like a gambler's dice, his face a map of fresh calculations scrawled in pencil lead. Pappy, the mounts are solid. Torque checked to 200 foot-pounds, he said, voice pitched low against the waking bass, handing over a clipboard thick with figures. But the recoil sims, they're screaming. That kicks 15,000 pounds per square inch. Frames reinforced, but if the dampers seize... Gunn took the board, eyes scanning the columns not with doubt, but hunger, a mechanic's gaze, translating numbers to the whine of stressed aluminum. Dampers won't seize. I betted 'em in truck oil, viscous enough to bite back. He clapped Fox's shoulder, the gesture rough as affection in a foxhole. You're the brain, Jack. I'm the hands. She'll hold, or we'll bury her pretty. The crew assembled piecemeal, a wiry armorer named Ruiz, fingers nimble as a pickpocket, chambering the inert shells with a series of metallic clunks that echoed like chambered threats. Lieutenant Harlan Reynolds drew pilot duty, volunteered, or drafted by Gunn's quiet command, his face still shadowed from yesterday's empty raid, eyes flicking to the cannon with the wariness of a man eyeing a cobra. This thing's a widowmaker, Pappy, Reynolds muttered, buckling into the cockpit, the leather creaking under him like old bones. One pop, and we're swimming with the rays. Trust the bird, Gunn replied from the catwalk, voice steady as a heartbeat, leaning in to check the firing circuit. A jury-rigged solenoid wired to the bombardier's panel, now gutted for trigger. She's got teeth now, time to bear 'em. Engines coughed to life, the twin Wright cyclones snarling awake in a belch of blue smoke, props carving the humid air into eddies. Vibration thrummed through the tarmac, a prelude to symphony, as Old Faithful taxied out, her shadow stretching long toward the takeoff strip. Gunn watched from the hangar door, arms folded, the wind tugging at his cap like insistent fingers. Clara, the name a ward against the knot in his gut, this bite's for you, for the rice they hoard while you ration breaths. The run-up was poetry in peril, Reynolds nursing her down the scarred runway, tail dragging low for balance, the nose-heavy beast, reluctant as a bull in harness. At rotation, she clawed skyward slow, wings flexing against the torque, a groan audible even from the ground, metal protesting its new burden. Fox winced beside Gunn, stopwatch ticking like a fuse. Climb rates down 20%? She's wallowing like a drunk. She's learning, Gunn said, eyes locked on the climbing spec, the drone of radials fading to a persistent hum. Give her altitude, then bite. Up there at 5,000 feet, the world narrowed to instruments and instinct. Reynolds leveled off over the reef, the target hulk, a rusting freighter scuttled post-Coral Sea, her decks awash in turquoise shallows, squatting 2 miles off like a sacrificial altar. The bombardier station, now a gunner's roost, housed Sergeant Lyle Boomer Tate, a Texan with hands like hams, sweating through his flight suit as he cradled the trigger. Range 1,500 yards, sir, Tate called over the intercom, voice tinny against the engine's roar. Waves at 10 o'clock low, she's steady. Reynolds banked gentle, diving shallow to 500 feet, the sea rushing up like a lover's slap, spray feathering the props. Wind howled through the vents, salt stinging eyes. On the clock, he barked. Fire when sights kiss her bridge. Tate's thumb depressed, click, the solenoid bridging, pyrotechnic igniter sparking the primer. No powder, but the mechanics mimicked. Breech slamming forward, round seating with a thunk, then the simulated launch. A weighted slug ejecting on compressed air, barrel recoiling against the absorbers in a brutal crack that shuddered the airframe like a thunderclap in a tin can. Below, Gunn felt it. A seismic whump carried on the wind, the plane bucking mid-dive as if kicked by a giant. On the ground, Fox's clipboard trembled from the vibration wave. "Jesus, did you see that, yaw?" "She's spinning." Up high, chaos reigned. The recoil torqued Old Faithful hard right, props clawing uneven air, altimeter spinning wild as Reynolds wrestled the yoke, boots mashing rudder pedals. "Hold her! Hold shit!" Alarms wailed, structural stress indicators flickering red, a panel in the nose cracking with a sound like breaking bone. Tate tumbled from his perch, shell casing, practice inert, bouncing across the deck like a deranged pinball, clanging against bulkheads. The plane yawed 30 degrees, sea tilting to horizon, waves reaching up like accusatory hands. "Pull up, now," Reynolds snarled, throttle slamming forward, cyclones bellowing protest as he clawed for altitude. The dummy rounds splashed harmless short of the hulk, a pathetic plunk in the shallows, but the beast had awakened. Raw, unrefined, her fury indiscriminate. Gunn's voice crackled over the radio, calm as a confessor. "Talk to me, Hawk. She breathing?" "Barely," Reynolds gasped, leveling at 2,000 feet, the airframe groaning like a wounded animal, rivets weeping tiny beads of oil. Recoil cracked the forward spar, vibrations sheared a hydraulic line. Nose feels like it's shedding skin. But, Christ, Pappy, that kick, felt it in my teeth. Gunn's jaw tightened on the ground, the words a lash across his resolve. Orthodoxy's spectre loomed, Kenney's warning echoing, "If it flops, your neck." But failure wasn't fracture, it was data, grief's algebra. "Limp her home, we'll patch. That's one in the pipe, next one's the kill." The landing was a symphony of mercy. Gear kissing tarmac with a screech, props feathering as Reynolds taxied in, smoke trailing from a vent like a sigh of relief. Crew swarmed, Ruiz under the belly, Fox probing the nose with a flashlight, faces grim as pallbearers. Gunn climbed the wing, boots drumming aluminum, peering into the ravaged prow. Cracks spiderwebbed the bulkhead, recoil absorbers compressed to accordion ruin, a hydraulic puddle staining the deck like spilled blood. The cannon stared back, barrel warm, innocent in its savagery. "She's hurt bad," Fox said, tracing a fissure with a finger, voice laced with the engineer's lament. Frames twisted, 5 degrees off true. One more like that, and she sheds wings midair. "Pappy, it's mad science. Kenney'll ground us both." Gunn knelt, hand on the barrel, feeling the residual heat pulse like a fevered vein. "Mad?" The word curdled. Manila's fall replayed. Clara's grip on the Catalina's rail, children's eyes wide as the bay receded. Time's antagonist, that inexorable tick. Another convoy slipping south, another ration denied in Santo Tomas. Bureaucracy's chains, ordnance boards in Washington, scribbling vetoes on yellow pads, wouldn't halt him. This fracture, a lesson in fury's weight. "Not mad," he murmured. Rising, eyes alight with the forge's gleam. "Hungry. We feed her right, beef up the trunnions with tank plate, swap absorbers for aircraft-grade springs, balance the load fore and aft. She fired, Jack, that's the song. Now we tune it." The afternoon blurred to industry, welders' torches hissing blue hymns, Ruiz hammering fresh mounts, Fox recalibrating with calipers and curses. Gunn worked at the heart, disassembling the breech, filing burrs from the feed ramp, his mind a whirlwind of metrics, muzzle velocity at 1,200 feet per second, penetration on 4-inch plate, the arc of a shell skipping wave tops like a stone from hell. Each adjustment a talisman, for Paul's scraped knees, now camp floors, for Mary's songs silenced by hunger. Sweat carved salt tracks down his temples, the hangar a cauldron where grief transmuted to geometry. Dusk fell reluctant, the sea a molten brass beyond the palms. Old Faithful stood reborn, spar spliced with I-beams, dampers rebuilt from B-17 spares, the cannon bedded deeper, its recoil path a calculated betrayal of physics. Reynolds lingered, nursing a bruised ego and a tumbler of base rot gut, his skepticism cracking like the old panels. "You think she'll forgive us, Pappy? That first dance, she danced wild." Gunn wiped his hands on a rag black as midnight, the cloth reeking of flux and resolve. "Forgive? She's got no room for grudge, only hunger." He glanced seaward where the reef gnashed under incoming tide, the hulk waiting like a taunt. Tomorrow's test, live loads, low pass, aim spite. Word had trickled, pilots in the mess whispering of the flying howitzer, awe edging out doubt. Kenney himself rang the field phone at twilight, voice gravel over the line. Heard your bird through a tantrum, Gunn. Fix her, or scrap her. But if she sings, we ship her north, make those convoys pray. The general's latitude was a leash with slack, freedom laced with the blade of accountability. Gunn hung up, the receiver's click a period to the day's toll. Orthodoxy circled, time's thief, stealing days from Santo Tomas, turning Clara's letters to ghosts. But in the cannon's bore he saw refraction, light bending through steel, promise honed to point. Night deepened, stars pricking the canopy like tracer fire frozen mid-arc. Gunn lingered alone, floodlights casting his shadow long across the tarmac, the B-25 a sentinel in the gloom. He traced the muzzle once more, finger along the rifling spiral, imagining the shell's flight. Not scatter but strike, hull breached, convoy's heart exposed. This war's not maps and medals, he thought, the night's hush amplifying the sea's murmur. It's ledgers of loss, I'll balance yours, love. In fire. The wind off the water carried a salt promise, the reef's waves a rhythmic challenge. Tomorrow she'd roar again, not apology but evolution. It wasn't supposed to fly again, but it did, and this time it bit back. The Bismarck Sea stretched like a hammered anvil under March skies 1943, a cauldron of turquoise and threat, where trade winds whipped whitecaps into frenzy and coral fangs lurked just below the surface. 8 troop transports plowed northward from New Guinea's maw, bellies swollen with 6,900 soldiers bound for Leh, fresh meat for the Emperor's grinder, their khaki ranks crammed deck to bilge, dreaming of glory amid the stench of diesel and desperation. Escorts flanked them, 8 destroyers, prows slicing foam like knives through silk, anti-aircraft batteries glinting under the sun's merciless eye. Overhead, Zeros patrolled in loose veils, engines a distant hornet hum. This convoy was no ghost in the night, it was daylight arrogance, a bet that Allied wings had clipped after Guadalcanal's toll. But intelligence cracked the veil, PT boats spotting the snake uncoil from Rabaul at dusk, radio whispers to MacArthur's HQ, painting the path in red. General Kenney's 5th Air Force stirred like a hive kicked. B-17s for high hammer, B-25s for the low bite, bowfighters to shear the escorts. And at the spear's tip, guns brewed, 4 Mitchells, Old Faithful among them, noses armored blunt, 75mm fangs loaded with AP shells that could punch a destroyer's vitals from 800 yards. Word of the strafer cannon had rippled north from Townsville like a fever. Pilots clamoring for the mod, Fox's blueprints Xeroxed in Greece, Kenney greenlighting the gamble with a curt, sink 'em or swim, Gunn. Paul Gunn rode co-pilot in Old Faithful, the cockpit a sweatbox of dials and dread, Reynolds at the controls, his hands steady now where doubt once trembled. The formation, 16 B-25s in loose echelons, drone south from Dobodura at 50 feet, wave tops kissing props, engines muffled to a predatory growl over the open intercom. Salt spray feathered the canopy, the sea's breath a tactile promise of violence. Gunn's fingers drummed the armrest, scarred knuckles white. Clara, this one's yours. Every hull we crack, a door swings wider for home. Bandits at 11 o'clock high, Reynolds murmured, eyes on the drifting clouds, altimeter nailed at 100 feet, the horizon a blur of blue on blue. Zeros, 12, maybe more. Kenney's baiting them with the heavies up top. Gunn nodded, peering through the armored slit, the Pacific a vast chessboard where pieces converged. Far ahead, the B-17s circled at 10,000 feet, bomb bays yawning like judgment, drawing the fighters upward in a swirling dogfight, tracers stitching the sky, silk shoots blooming premature white. Below, the convoy fattened on the glass, black hulls etched against the swell, wakes foaming silver trails, gunners at their mounts, oblivious yet to the wolves at deck level. Strafing run first, Gunn said, voice low thunder over the radial's thrum, flipping the master arm to the 50 cals clustered under wings and nose. Rake the escorts, soften 'em, then we tooth it, Tate sights hot. From the gunner's nook, Boomer Tate's drawl crackled back, laced with the Texan's fatal grin. Hotter than a jalapeno in hell, Major? Cannons chambered 6 birds AP mix. Just point her nose, and I'll paint the sea red. The formation splintered on cue, 12 Mitchells peeling left for the destroyer screen, wings skimming troughs, props churning spray into mist. Gunn's bird hung right with 3 sisters, Vengeance, Hellcat, Reaper, targeting the heart. the lead transport, Kyokusei Maru, her decks a anthill of troops waving at the phantom above. Reynolds dipped lower, 30 feet now, the hull looming like a mountain of riveted spite, anti-air crews scrambling as the roar registered. Feet wet, Fox 3, Reynolds barked, triggers depressed in a symphony of spite. The nose 50s erupted first, a burst of blue fire, bullets hosing the freighter's bridge like biblical hail, glass shattering in crystalline screams, figures tumbling over rails into the froth. Wings followed, pods spitting 800 rounds per minute, stitching the waterline from bow to stern, plating buckling under the storm, screams lost to the wind. Kyokusei Maru shuddered, her .25 cals traversing wild pom-poms puffing black smoke that the props shredded to tatters. Gunn's world narrowed to the gun sight, a glass rectangle framing chaos, the transport's gray flank rushing up like a cliff face. "Cannon! Now!" he commanded, the word a release valve for the rage coiled since Manila's fall. Tate's trigger bit, the solenoid snick, primer flashing, propellant igniting in a guttural boom that hammered the airframe like a god's fist. Recoil surged, absorbers compressing with a hydraulic whine, the Mitchell yawing left as the 75mm spat its 30-pound spear. Shell arcing low, skipping once off a wave crest in a geyser of white, then crunch. Hull breached amidships, steel parting like wet paper under the AP's spite. The explosion rippled outward, a thunderclap muffled by water. The Kyokusei Maru's guts venting oil and screams, troops pitching into the sea amid splintered decking, lifeboats capsizing in the boil. Gunn felt the hit in his bones, the plane steadying under Reynolds' yoke, the sea vomiting wreckage in her wake. "Solid strike," he breathed, the intercom alive with whoops from the wingmen. "She's listing. Follow with strafes." But the escorts woke furious. Destroyers wheeling, main batteries traversing, 5-inchers barking orange lances that plumed geysers yards off the props. A shell screamed past Vengeance's tail, shearing antenna wire in a spark cascade, her pilot, Captain Ellis, cursing over the net. Flax up our skirts, climbing for second pass, cannon armed. The sky thickened to bedlam. Zeros stooping from their high duel, wings folding in on the strafers like falcons on doves, 20mm cannon fire winking from cowlings. Reynolds jinked hard, a Zero's burst stitching the sea beside them, bullets skipping like malevolent stones. Bandit on 6. Brake left. Gunn twisted in his seat, grabbing the co-pilot's 30-cal mount, trigger chattering as he hosed the pursuer's canopy, glass crazing, the Zero smoking seaward in a corkscrew dive. Below, the convoy fractured, transports zigzagging wild, destroyers screening with smoke pots belching black veils, but Gunn's birds pierced the fog like hounds on scent. Hellcat dove next, her 75mm thundering at a flank destroyer. Shirayuki, shell punching through the armored bridge, igniting magazines in a chain of hellfire that lifted her stern clear before the sea reclaimed her in a vortex of steam and shards. Twisted steel pinwheeled skyward, raining like apocalyptic confetti, the blast wave rocking the Mitchells mid-pass, props feathering through the pressure wave. Gunn's rage refined to ritual, each boom a ledger entry, balancing Santo Tomas's scales. For John's small hands, clutching wire. For Mary's fever dreams, the intercom wove a tapestry of fury. Cannon away, hull kiss from Reaper, her shell gutting a transport's engine room, flames licking the stacks in hungry orange tongues. Escort down, 2 birds, from Ellis, his second round cratering a destroyer's deck, turrets toppling like felled oaks. The sea boiled response, oil slicks blooming black petals, men flailing in the slicks like discarded puppets, the air acrid with cordite and charred planking. Hours blurred to eternity, passes overlapping in the haze, B-25s wheeling like sharks in a frenzy, the high bombers joining the dirge with 500-pound eggs that skipped and detonated in cataclysmic roosts. Zeros claimed toll. One Mitchell cartwheeling into the swell, another limping north trailing smoke, but Gunn's cannon quartet danced unscathed, their low altitude a shield and sword, waves muffling the flak spite. A final stoop on the trailing transport, Teo Maru, Reynolds aligning the prow like a duelist's aim, Tate's boom echoing the formation's crescendo. Shell burrowing deep, igniting fuel bunkers in a plume that lit the horizon like false dawn, the ship folding inward, stern rising skyward before plunging to feed the abyss. Pull-off climbed them to 500 feet, the sea a charnel canvas, hulls awash, prows canted at mad angles, fires painting the waves in flickering gold. No cheers over the net, just ragged breaths, the universal exhale of survival. Convoys done, Kenney's voice crackled from command relay, gravel laced with awe. Sunk 8 of 8, escorts scattered to hell. Gunn, your monsters did the butcher's work. Reynolds banked for home, the formation coalescing ragged, props droning a victory hymn over the wreckage's hush. Gunn leaned back, the cockpit's heat leaching from his bones, replaced by a hollow ache, triumph's shadow, where elation met the void. 8 ships, thousands adrift, but Manila's gates still barred. The cannon, cooling in its nest, smoked faintly, barrel etched with the day's score, 5 kills claimed, each a ripple starving the Empire's sprawl. Orthodoxy's weight, those desk-bound doubters, lifted fractionally, time's thief slowed, if only a stride. Dusk bled purple across the water as they crossed the coast, Dobadura's fires winking welcome. Ground crews swarmed the birds like supplicants, tallying the dents, flak holes like pocks, a wingtip nicked by 0 lead. Fox met Gunn on the tarmac, face split in rare grin, blueprints clutched like talismans. She sang, Pappy, math be damned, Kenney's wiring Washington, Cannon Mitchell's, game changer. Gunn nodded, boots crunching coral, the sea's distant roar a lullaby laced with ghosts. Sung? She screamed. His eyes drifted north to islands where convoys once ruled unchallenged, now reduced to myth's rubble. The Pacific, that vast, indifferent forge, had witnessed transmutation, bombers to predators, grief to geometry. But victory's ink was blood, troops drowning in the dark, captains cursing from rafts. And in its wake, Gunn felt the vow's edge sharpen, not dull. Night fell swift, stars wheeling over the airfield like spent tracers. In the mess, pilots toasted with warm beer, tales blooming exaggerated. Gunn's beast gutted her like a tuna. Laughter rang hollow to him, the faces blurring to his children's, thinner perhaps in the camp's unyielding grip. One battle, one step. The cannon's echo lingered in his palms, the recoil's bruise a badge reminding, innovation wasn't born of blueprints, but the alchemy of loss made lethal. The wind off the Bismarck carried faint cries, imagined or real, the sea's confession. Convoys would slink again, but now with fear's shadow, knowing the waves hid fangs. When the smoke cleared, the sea wasn't blue anymore. It was black with oil and victory. The Bismarck Sea settled into an uneasy hush in the days after the maelstrom, its waters a vast sepulchre strewn with the detritus of hubris. Oil sheens iridescent under the tropic sun, flotsam bobbing like cryptic runes, helmets dented as bells, crates splintered open to spill rice into the indifferent swell. Survivor rafts dotted the horizon, fragile specks where Japanese soldiers clung to the wreckage of empire, their salt-crusted faces turned southward in futile prayer. Allied reconnaissance PBYs circled low, cameras whirring judgments, confirming the toll. All 8 transports claimed 15,000 tons of steel and sinew consigned to the deep, the convoy's arrogance repaid in full. Radio traffic from Rabaul crackled with panic, admirals decrying the ghost bombers that struck from the waves, their low-slung fury a heresy against the high-altitude catechism of pre-war doctrine. At Dobadura, the aftermath unfolded in the grind of routine laced with revelation. Ground crews swarmed the returning Mitchells like bees to nectar, patching flak-rent fuselages with dope and fabric, while pilots traded tales in the mess tent over lukewarm coffee and canned corned beef, the air thick with the musk of unwashed flight suits and victory's faint afterburn. Paul Gunn moved through it all like a spectre at his own feast. Hands still bearing the phantom recoil's ache, the 75mm thunder echoing in his palms like a persistent migraine. Old Faithful squatted on the dispersal pan, her nose scarred but unbowed, barrel cooled to a dull gleam, the faint cordite tang lingering in her vents like a lover's parting breath. Jack Fox cornered him at dusk, blueprints rolled under one arm like a prophet's scroll, his glasses perpetually fogged from the coastal steam. Pappy, the brass is buzzing, Kenney's teletype to Hap Arnold hit Washington yesterday. Cannon Mitchell's decisive, recommend production. Your scribbles on napkins? They're gospel now. Fox unrolled the sheets on a crate, lines refined from grease pencil fury to architect's precision. Trunnions beefed with chromoly, recoil systems piped from B-29 hydraulics, the nose a modular maw for quick swaps. North Americans tooling up in Kansas, B-25G variant first, then the H with dual 50s flanking the beast. Hundreds off the line by summer. You birthed a lineage. Gunn traced the schematics with a scarred finger, the paper crinkling like dry leaves under frost, his eyes distant on the palm-fringed horizon where the sea brooded still. Lineage, he echoed, the word tasting of ash and absolution. Orthodoxy's weight, those Pentagon mandarins who'd scoffed at field mods, their war waged in memos and mock-ups, had cracked under the Bismarck's verdict. No more scattershot sermons from 20,000 feet. The Pacific demanded predators, birds that bled the enemy at the waterline. His madness, distilled through Fox's math and the crew's sweat, became canon. Skip bombing's bastard child, strafer cannon doctrine, etched into training manuals from Brisbane to Bayek. Pilots who'd once eyed the mod with the wariness of untested blades now clamored for conversions. Squadrons rechristened Gunn's gunslingers, their low passes a ritual of retribution. But Triumph's forge cooled uneven. Letters from Santo Tomas trickled in on Red Cross clippers, Clara's script faint as spider silk on rationed paper. We're enduring. Gardens in the yard now, carrots thin but defiant. Catherine turned 15 in wire. She sketched you a P-40, wings like eagles. The guards loosen as the ships falter. Your work? We feel the ripples. Gunn folded them into his breast pocket, the creases worn smooth as prayer beads, each word a tether against the unraveling. Time's antagonist, that relentless chronometer, had bent, not broken, under the convoy's choke. Rabaul starved slow. Fuel bunkers siphoned dry, zeros grounded by the dozen, the Emperor's sons whittling to ghosts on half rations. Manila's chains, forged in 41's fire, frayed thread by thread. Kenney summoned him to the HQ tent one monsoon-lashed evening, the canvas slapping like sails in a gale, maps yellowed and curled under hurricane lamps' flicker. The general puffed a panatella, smoke wreathing his bulldog scowl, a bottle of captured sake sweating on the field desk. You did it, Gunn. Turned the tide without a medal parade. Bismarck was the anvil, your bird's the hammer. Brass wants you stateside, consult on the production birds. But first. Kenney slid a folder across, stamped with the eagle's flourish. Promotion to colonel, and a ticket home, if the Japs fold quick. Gunn took the papers, the ink still tacky, but the weight settled like lead in his gut. Home, he murmured, the syllable foreign now, laced with the radial's drone and the cannon's cough. Home, where the war's echo lingers in empty chairs. He saluted crisp, exiting into the downpour, rain sheeting off his cap in silver rods, the mud sucking at his boots like the Pacific's grasp. The legacy unfurled in his mind. B-25 Gs rolling off Inglewood lines by July, their prows blunt as Gunn's vow, shipping to the Marianas, where Marine flyers honed the tactic on Iwo's convoys. Then the H's, 850 cals framing the 75mm, a mobile fortress that shredded picket destroyers off Okinawa, doctrine evolving to the gunship's gospel. Low, lethal, unyielding. The war's end came not in thunder, but attrition's whisper. August 1945, Hiroshima's flash, Nagasaki's shadow, the Emperor's voice crackling surrender over shortwave. Manila liberated February prior, Rangers storming Santo Tomas in a blitz of grenades and grapples, guards scattering like roaches to dawn. Gunn learned mid-flight from Biak en route to a raid scrubbed by the news. Reynolds whooping over the intercom as the radio spat the bulletin. They're free, Pappy, Clara. The kids. Manila's ours. He banked the Mitchells seaward, props idling over the Celebes Sea, the vast blue a mirror to the ache uncoiling in his chest. Free. The word fractured, spilling relief laced with rust. The years stolen, the innocents annealed in Camp's kiln. He touched down at Clark Field 3 days later, the runway a scar of bomb craters and triumph. C-47s ferrying the gaunt legions home. Clara waited in the terminal's shade, thinner than memory but unbowed. Her arms a harbor as he stumbled from the hatch, the children's faces blooming around her like desert flowers after rain. Catherine tall now, eyes sharp as her sketches. Paul Jr., grease-fingered from tinkering with smuggled tools. Mary with Clara's fire, reciting camp poems. John quiet but his hug a vice of reclaimed trust. Paul, Clara whispered against his neck, the salt of tears mingling with aviation fuel's bite, her frame fragile under his hands. You kept it. The promise. Not quick, but kept. He held her, the world narrowing to that embrace. The war's roar fading to the terminal's hum, nurses calling names, duffels thumping like spent casings. But the fracture lingered, invisible as a hairline crack in the soul, Nights when he'd wake to phantom recoil, the children's laughter hollowed by silences unspoken, Clara's gaze drifting to windows where Zeros once darkened the bay. The Pacific had taken its tithe, not limbs or breath, but the seamless weave of before. Family as unbroken circuit, not a mended spar. Gunn rebuilt in fragments. Homestead in Washington state, wrenching civilian birds for crop dusters, teaching the kids to fly jennies over wheat fields that echoed Iowa's ghost. But the forge's mark endured, hands that shaped vengeance now coaxed peace, yet the thunder hummed beneath. Legacy bloomed posthumous, as prophets often do. Gunn passed in 1957, aneurysm, swift as a Zero's stoop, medals pinned to his dress, blues in a veteran's right, Clara at the graveside, earth redolent of turned soil and closure. The B-25H faded with the war, but her kin endured. A-26 invaders borrowing the nose gun heresy, then the AC-47s over Vietnam's patties, circling slow with miniguns dirge, evolving to the Spectre's behemoths. AC-130s prowling night skies, 105mm howitzers belching judgment on trails that snaked like old convoys. Air power's age, defined not by Adam's blaze but the low-level alchemy. Gunn's quiet obsession, turning bombers to bleed the beast at its veins. Historians footnote him now, Pappy Gunn, the mechanic's rage refined to revolution, amid the admiral's gloss and general's gambits. But in the rotary's thrum, the cannon's echo persists. A blacksmith's son who couldn't breach walls, so he breached seas. Some men built weapons for glory's gleam. He built one for closure's grasp. Grief makes some prey in shadows, it made him create in fire. Pappy Gunn didn't just arm a plane, he armed an idea that still flies today. He turned grief into firepower, and firepower into history. If you believe forgotten inventors deserve their stories told, subscribe for more untold World War II brilliance.